So just to reorient ourselves, the northern kingdom has been in exile since around 722 BC. King Hezekiah is on the throne of Judah. The year is he was co-regent with his father, but now his father's dead, and the year is 716 BC. And he is the only king in Judah. No co-regency. So when his father, who was a sinful man, died, he went hardcore for the Lord. He totally went hardcore. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, which, here's the point. Good men can come from wicked men, which is what happened in this case, and wicked men can come from good men, which is going to happen in this case as well, because Hezekiah's son, Manasseh, is going to be the worst king in the history of Judah. But in the meantime, King Hezekiah is responsible to do what the Lord has called him to do. And it's all spelled out in God's word, and he's doing it. He's destroying the evil that his father did. He's Deuteronomy 12ing that place up. He's cleaning it up. He opened the doors of the temple the first day of the first month, right after his dad died. His dad had closed the temple doors. And he cleansed it. He cleansed it within 8 days using an army of Levites to do the work. And proper temple worship was reinstated. But he had to make that first step. Look, the whole thing was a mess. There's idolatry everywhere in Judah. The people are absorbed in it. And he had to make the brave choice to go ahead and turn the tide, the rising tide of idolatry. And he did so. And he got the people organized to do it correctly.
See? Do we know?
Yeah. You are really good today with those types of questions.
Sorry.
Hezekiah was 2 years old. Did you get that? If not, I'm sure it's in there somewhere. After the temple was ready, they had this awesome celebration with sacrifices and music, and they did sacrifices not just for themselves, but for all Israel. It weighs heavily on Hezekiah's heart what has fallen on the northern kingdom. Okay? They invited everybody to come to Judah to celebrate the Passover. He sent emissaries throughout Israel to those who were still in the land. He sent emissaries to them.
Hezekiah was 25 years old when he reigned.
He was 25. There you go. Thank you, Joe. You're a good man. But many of those that escaped the exile in Israel that were still there whenever the people came from Hezekiah and he said, come to celebrate Passover, they laughed at them. God's judgment had come upon them, and their response was laughter. However, some from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun came, which is interesting. The tribes were still in the land of Israel, yet there's 10 lost tribes. The big thing, people loved it. Just as a side note, there are people in Africa who say that they are the 10 lost tribes. There are people somewhere in the UK who say that they're the 10 lost tribes. There are people in the Pacific Northwest who say that they're the 10 lost tribes. They're all wrong, and they're all deceived. There aren't 10 lost tribes. And it certainly isn't people from Ham, and it certainly isn't people from Japheth. So white people and black people who are hung up on it are fools. Plain and simple, fools. As if it matters anymore anyway. Okay. So they celebrated the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Instead of, it's supposed to be, you have Passover, and then the next 7 days after Passover is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They enjoyed it so much that they did the Feast of Unleavened Bread for another 7 days. They had 2 weeks of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And they went around after that smashing the pillars and the high places until they were all destroyed. I mean, zealous, big time. Hezekiah restored Judah, and he tried to restore what was left of Israel.
Two kingdoms have merged?
No. There's just Judah. So there's just Judah in the south. Okay, here's my map. there's Judah in this area here. Israel is part of Assyria. The Assyrian Empire is all here, and Assyria is pushing into Egypt. Okay? They're trying to take over Egypt. But Assyria has put people that they defeated in other countries and threw them into the northern kingdom of Israel. And then you still have people in the northern kingdom of Israel. And they took people from the northern kingdom of Israel and dealt them out throughout their empire. Okay? Does that make sense? So they're Hezekiah is sending from Jerusalem into Israel people to go and find who's left of the tribes. Say, come join us. So, but Israel is part of the Assyrian Empire right now. Okay, northern kingdom. So there's no northern kingdom. They're just part of Assyria. So, but Hezekiah then boldly, remember Judah was a vassal of Assyria. Hezekiah is rebelling against that vassalage because they're not supposed to be ruled by a foreign king. It's just supposed to be the kings of Judah. So he's really trying to do what is right in God's eyes. But King Sennacherib of Assyria doesn't like that. Why on earth would you? If you have one vassal that rebels successfully, you're going to have a bunch of vassals that are rebelling successfully. So he sends his army and he defeats around 46 towns in Judah. And Hezekiah repented, and he sends a big ransom to King Sennacherib. Says, okay, leave us alone. And Sennacherib takes the ransom money and says, thank you. We're still going to kick your butt. We're still going to defeat you just like we defeated everybody else. And so Sennacherib sends his general, which this is in 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, and it's also in the book of Isaiah. It's a great story. Isaiah 36, I believe. But his general, Rabshakeh, comes up, and there's this great scene. I don't think I have a picture. But Rabshakeh comes, and he taunts the officials. Hezekiah sends out 3 of his officials, probably because Hezekiah is sick. But he sends out 3 of his officials to meet with Rabshakeh at the gates of Jerusalem. And the 3 officials are talking to him in Aramaic, in their language, in the language of Assyria. And Rabshakeh says, I know Hebrew, and I'm not going to be quiet. I'm going to tell you all, even you people up on the wall, you're toast. All the other gods of all the other places have said the same garbage that your Hezekiah is saying. Don't listen to him. We're going to beat you. You need to just surrender. And this is where he says, I'll tell you what. I'll give you 2,000 horses if you can put men on them to fight against us. I really will. And he really would have. I'm sure he would have. And so they're trembling. So Hezekiah gets the message. Rabshakeh goes away. He sends a letter. They receive a letter that says the same thing that was said before. And Rabshakeh comes back. Let me explain something at this time. Assyria is pushing. Here's the map. Can you tell what we've got here? This is Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the Dead Sea, Egypt. Okay. Assyria is pushing down this way, heading towards Egypt. Rabshakeh is in Jerusalem. And Sennacherib, their forces are divided. They're going down like this, 2 prongs, okay? And Sennacherib's defeating towns in Judea, but he also wants to push down into Egypt. Egypt at this time is being controlled by Cush. You have these African pharaohs that are running Egypt at this time, okay? And this is a very fascinating history that's talked about. So there are historians that talk all about this awesome event that happens. An Assyrian of about 185,000 come to lay siege on Jerusalem. Rabshakeh is there. But they all die from a plague. And the heathen historian, Berosus of Chaldea, he records it himself. He says that they caught a plague and they all died in one night. And that's what happened. They died. Interestingly enough, Sennacherib, when he came home, he wrote that he left Hezekiah like a bird in a cage. This is what he wrote. There's a Sennacherib cylinder that it's written on there, all of his conquests, all that he did, and he laughs about it and says, I left Hezekiah like a bird in a cage, trapped in Jerusalem. Well, his sons, his two sons killed him for his failure. That's Sennacherib. He went to worship at the temple of his god a few years later, and his sons killed him because Sennacherib failed. He lost all those men. That's not the only place he lost. He lost in Egypt as well. We don't get this story in the Bible, but God delivers Cush. He delivers the Egyptians as well from the army of Sennacherib. Herodotus writes about it. An army of mice came and ate the shield straps off of their shields and ate the bowstrings off of their bows. And when Sennacherib got up in the morning, they noticed that all their equipment was destroyed by rats. And they left. On the way back, he runs into Rabshakeh, who says, they're all dead, Your Highness. And he's like, no! And he comes back and says, well, why didn't you beat Judah? I left him like a bird in a cage. I really showed him. He's not going anywhere. Cool story, Dad. Tell me more. Such is history. But Hezekiah was sick around that same time, and he was going to die. And God told him that he was going to die and that he needed to get his affairs in order for his house. But Hezekiah asked for more life, and God grants it to him. God grants him 15 more years. Was it right for him to ask for more time? Let's see. Hezekiah's last 15 years. You ready? 3 years later, he had a son. 3 years later, he would have been dead. But instead, he's still alive. And he has a son named Manasseh, who becomes the most evil king in the history of Judah. Had Hezekiah died, would Manasseh have been born? No. Also, in that 15-year period, emissaries came from Babylon. Babylon, you might want to know, was beginning to push back on Assyria. And Babylon and Egypt were pushing back on Assyria. No, I'm sorry. Egypt was trying to help Assyria push back on Babylon because Babylon was getting stronger. So people came from Babylon, and you have to go this way because you can't go across the desert or you'll die. So they go up the Euphrates River, and then they come down to meet Hezekiah. It's like, hey, we're from Babylon. We're going against Assyria now, and we're doing well. We heard you went against Assyria. Congratulations. And Berosus, the Chaldean, he comes from this region. This is the region of Chaldea. So he also recorded the event. So the Babylonians were like, did you hear what happened? Everybody knows Assyria's going down. Okay? And while they're there, Hezekiah says, hey, what's up, fellas? Let me show you all the treasures of my kingdom. Here, come see. Here's the royal treasury. Wow. Here's the temple and all the treasures of the temple. Pretty awesome, isn't it? Oh, yeah. Have you shown us everything? Oh, I've shown you everything, but have a nice day. And so the prophet Isaiah says to him, what have you done? He said, well, I showed them everything. Why did you do that? Because you did this, do you know that they're going to come back here and they're going to take you all into exile? But it's not going to happen in your time. You know what Hezekiah thought? Well, I don't care. It's not going to happen to me. Is that a good attitude? Well, at least I'll be fine. You know, Louis XV had the same kind of thought. He said, in my time it's going to be fine. After me comes the deluge. And of course, you know what happened to his son, Louis XVI? He met the business end of a guillotine. The king. That's the French Revolution. So yeah, that was his attitude. The wrong attitude to have. And that was in the 15 years. So he died and his evil son Manasseh took the throne. Should he have asked for more life? You know, sometimes God has a plan like this, and the best thing is to go through with it, even though it doesn't sound very good. All right, doesn't mean that you die. But King Manasseh comes to the throne, 687 to 642. He's the most evil king of Judah ever. This is the unrighteous from the righteous. He had a wonderful father, but I'm going to tell you this, I bet Hezekiah did not pour into him. And I like the fact that it said, a few hours ago we were looking, David poured into Solomon. But he became like the Israelites, and he became like the Canaanites. Look at all the things he did. He worshipped Baal. He worshipped Asherah. He worshipped the sun and the moon and the stars. He did child sacrifice, witchcraft, divination, consulted mediums and spiritists, built idolatrous altars in the temple of God. Built idolatrous altars in the temple. And he killed so many innocent people. This is Manasseh. He seduced the people of Judah to do more evil than the previous generations and in the other nations that were there before. He's worse than the Amalekites, worse than the Amorites, worse than all of them. And he's supposed to be a light to the nations. God's prophets came to him and told him his doom and prophesied again that Judah was doomed. It doesn't say it in the Bible, but many believe that Isaiah lived to the time of Manasseh and that Manasseh had Isaiah sawn in half. I did not consult Josephus. I need to check to see if that's in there. So God brought the Assyrians against him, and the Assyrians captured Manasseh and took him all the way to Babylon. Okay, here's Babylon. All right. So Manasseh realized while he was in captivity that he was wrong in all that he did. All of his hopes he had placed in these false religions crumbled when he got taken and all that he had to endure there. So the good news about Manasseh is that he repented and he finally learned that I am is God. He finally learned it, but he had to be smashed and taken into captivity to learn it. They released him and he came back to Jerusalem and he dedicated the rest of his life to undoing all the evil that he had done. The problem is this. The people were still corrupt. And they still sacrificed even to the Lord on the high places, transgressing Deuteronomy 12. And the people themselves were corrupt. Even though Manasseh made a turn, the people were corrupt. He died and they let him be buried in his own house in the garden. Then came King Ammon, his son. He did what was evil. He returned to the former sins of Manasseh, and his servants conspired against him and killed him. And then all the conspirators were killed, and then they made his young son Josiah king. Josiah becomes the greatest king in Judah since David, and he was born of a wicked man. But he was born in that wicked man's later life. So I kind of think Manasseh probably was pouring into his son Josiah as he had changed his life. He did what was right in God's eyes. When he was 8 years old, he became king, and he sought the Lord at the age of 16. So he was raised, and he sought the Lord at age 16. By age 20, he was extremely zealous for the Lord. He purged Jerusalem and Judah of all their idolatry. He was kind of like Hezekiah, going around smashing the altars, grinding them to powder, and scattering the ashes on the bones of those that sacrificed to them. And that's sending a real message. This is what we think about these practices. We smash it and scatter it on your bones. And then he fulfilled the prophecy that man of God, remember the man of God who came from Judah to Israel, and then King Jeroboam said, "Stay and eat with me." That guy who made the prophecy that Jeroboam... So he prophesied that a king named Josiah would come from David. And this is the Josiah that was prophesied about. He burned the bones of the false prophets on the altar, and he ground it all into dust. And he left the bones of the man of God alone. He said, "Whose marker is that?" And they said, "Oh, that's the man of God who prophesied about you." And he's like, "Okay, we'll leave that alone. Nobody mess with that." He did the same thing in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, Simeon, and even Naphtali, which is in the north. The tribes of Naphtali, or the tribe of Naphtali. At 26, he had finished purging the land, so 6-year campaign to purge the land of all the idolatry. And then he had the temple repaired, and the book of the law was found in the temple while they were doing repairs. The Bible, I mean, it's not like it was the only copy, but it is a copy that they found in the temple that had not been looked at for a long time, probably since Hezekiah's day. Josiah tore his clothes when it was read to him, and he tore his clothes when he heard all the words, because he realized how evil and wicked Judah had become. And he inquired of the Lord for all the remaining Israel and Judah, what's going to happen to us? Because Deuteronomy 28 says that they're going to go into exile, and that already happened to the northern kingdom. And so they came to inquire from a prophetess, a woman prophet named Huldah. And she told them that God was going to bring that doom on them. But not in Josiah's day, because Josiah is a good king. So, a prophetess. Josiah then read the whole book of the law to the people, and they rededicated themselves to the covenant. So this is big turning back to the Lord after years of turning away from him with Manasseh. But Manasseh didn't take it all the way. He didn't reinstate the reading of the Word of God. In Josiah's day, they reinstated the reading of the Word of God. And he made all the remaining tribes follow the Lord all the days of his life. So now you do have, it's still Judah, okay? It's still Judah. But you have other people coming to worship the Lord from the former kingdom of Israel. So other tribes. And all the remaining tribes of Israel celebrated Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread in such a way that it hadn't been celebrated like that since the days of Samuel. So all of his reforms were happening, and Assyria was falling apart. And in fact, Nineveh, the great city of Nineveh, over here somewhere off the Euphrates River, was destroyed in 612. There was a flood, and the Babylonians defeated them. But Judah was allied with Babylon, and Egypt was allied with Assyria. So you have a situation where Egypt, right here, is friends with Assyria. Babylon and Media and Persia are all fighting against Assyria and defeating Assyria. Egypt is coming to their aid. Egypt's going to come to Assyria's aid to try to push back. Because the last thing Egypt wants is to have somebody else take them over. Okay? And the Pharaoh at the time was this man named Pharaoh Necho. Nineveh's up here. So the Babylonians, this is the Euphrates River, the Babylonians are coming. And they're going to come down this way. So Josiah, since he's allied with Babylon, should he be allied with Babylon? Should Judah be in an alliance with them? No. Josiah gets involved in something that's none of his business. And he goes out to stop the Egyptians. He goes out to stop Pharaoh Necho. Pharaoh Necho reigned from 610 to 695, circa. And Pharaoh Necho said, "Why are you coming out here? I have no quarrel with you. Leave me alone." And Josiah didn't listen. And so Josiah died in the battle. He got arrowed. And then Jeremiah wrote a lament about his death. He died somewhere in Megiddo. And he refers to that in this messianic portion of Zechariah in Zechariah 12. Here's what it says of Josiah. I love this. It's 2 Kings 23, 25 through 27. "Before him there was no king like him who turned to the Lord with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his might." What does that sound like? Okay, David? The what?
No, I'm just saying the great commandment.
Yeah. What's the greatest commandment? From Deuteronomy 6. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. He's done it, right? according to all the law of Moses, nor did any like him arise after him. However, the Lord did not turn from the fierceness of his great wrath with which his anger burned against Judah, because of all the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him. The Lord said, I will remove Judah also from my sight, as I have removed Israel, and I will cast off Jerusalem, this city which I have chosen, and the temple which I said, my name shall be there. Then came King Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, a wicked king. He did all the evil that his fathers did, and he only reigned for 3 months. Pharaoh Necho deposed him, and Egypt turned Judah into a vassal. Judah became a vassal of Egypt. The king got stuck in Egypt, Jehoahaz. And he put his brother Eliakim on the throne instead. And Eliakim has another name, which is, he was born with the name Jehoiakim. And then he was given the name Eliakim by Pharaoh. So Necho gave Eliakim, snap, I had that backwards. Thank you. Let's start that over. Necho gave Eliakim, which means God of raising. He gave him the name of Jehoiakim, which means Yahweh raises up. Pharaoh Necho gave him that name. And he did evil as his fathers did. And Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon defeated Egypt. So it's too late for them. Egypt's been defeated, and then Babylon vassalized Judah. So Yahweh raises up. Yahweh defeated Judah. He rose up against Judah, his own people. But then Jehoiakim rebelled after 3 years. He rebelled in 605. And God sent the Chaldeans, the Arameans, the Moabites, and Ammonites against him, probably at the behest of the Babylonians, who was controlling them all. And then he got deposed with all of his nobles in 605 BC. This is when Daniel got deposed as well, in 605 BC. And you get that from Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. So in the 605 is the first exile for Judah. Okay? So he's taking them, whereas Assyria would grab the seeds and scatter them, Babylon likes to take all the good seed and bring it to Babylon. Okay? All the good seed goes to Babylon. And they will plant it there. And that's why Daniel was one of them that went, because he was intelligent, he was good looking, he was all these things. But Jehoiakim died in exile. And Nebuchadnezzar put Jehoiachin on the throne. But he was only 8, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Okay, but here's a problem. We have another scribal error. 2 Kings has his age at 18. But his father would have had to be 18 when he had him. And when his father was taken 3 years after his Jehoiachin's reign, it makes more sense because 8 years has passed since Jehoiachin left, and now this boy who didn't go with him is 8. He's either 8 or 18. It's one or the other. So, but there is a scribal error, be aware of. The Bible is not contradicting itself. Okay? So we have no guarantee that the copies we're going to get are going to say the right number. Okay? Numbers are the main place you're going to find problems are with numbers, because the Septuagint will have one set of numbers and the Hebrew will have another set of numbers. And the copies of the Septuagint that we have are older than the copies of the Hebrew that we have, which makes it difficult. Anyway, so he's either 8 or 18, either way. But he was taken into exile in Babylon in 597, because that's when he reigned, around there, along with a bunch of the articles from the temple. And this is what God had said in the days of Hezekiah through Jeremiah the prophet. Now all the mighty men All the captains, all the best people from the land. Again, this is what Babylon likes to do. They took the very best, the artisans, all of them, took them back to Babylon. Okay? Is that a good idea for Babylon? Take the best? I mean, here, you know what? They could kill them. But what good is that going to do Babylon? Let's bring them to the capital city. Let's wine and dine them. And let's get them on our side. And they were doing a good job there. They'll do a good job here. That's exactly Nebuchadnezzar's thought. So King Zedekiah was a son of Josiah. So he was an uncle of Jehoiachin and a son of Josiah. Nebuchadnezzar, he was born with the name Mattaniah, which is gift of Yahweh. And Nebuchadnezzar changed his name to Zedekiah, which is Yahweh is righteous. And I like that is his name, because Yahweh is righteous. God is righteous. Yahweh is God, and God is salvation. These are all such great names. His righteousness is what stands, and the righteousness of men, of these men, does not stand. You will have a righteous king, and then you have an unrighteous king. You have righteous people and unrighteous people. You have a remnant that is always there, which is nice. But God ultimately is the one that is righteous. And that's why it's important for us. Jesus died for us, and it is his righteousness that saves us. But like the kings of old, we have a choice to make on how we're going to live out our lives. But Zedekiah did evil, just as his nephews had done, and he refused to listen to Jeremiah the prophet. There's plenty in the book of Jeremiah about Zedekiah as well. There's some really good stories in there. He rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. I don't know what he was thinking. So around 591 BC, Ezekiel, in the book of Ezekiel, he sees a vision of the glory of the Lord departing the temple in preparation for its destruction. And then Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem, and all the pain of Deuteronomy 28 and 1 Kings 9 fell on them. 1 Kings 9, when God said to Solomon that he would reject the temple and he would wipe it off the face of the earth. It fell on them. The destruction of Jerusalem happened by Nebuchadnezzar. The rejection and destruction of the temple and the exile happened. And this happened on the Hebrew date, the 9th of Av, their month of Av, 586 BC, which would correspond to our date of July 16th, 586 AD. Let's flash forward. Nobody ever told me this. I discovered it one night while reading Josephus. The second temple is destroyed on the 9th of Av, the same day on their calendar, except in 70 AD. Or August 2nd, 70 AD. God rejected the second temple as well. Okay? On the same calendar day. On the 8th of Av, in 70 AD, all the Jews thought, tomorrow's the anniversary of the destruction of the first temple. Surely God will give us deliverance on the anniversary of the first temple. And when the temple caught fire, their mouths dropped open, and they were utterly defeated. The religion that we know today of Judaism was born after this event. They had to reinvent themselves after this event. So when a Christian goes looking to a rabbi to teach them, they have gone to a source that God has rejected. The rabbis have need to look to the Christians to see where the Messiah came, and not the other way around. So do not go looking to the rabbis that God has rejected. Okay, you can even look at Israel this day and say, is this what God intended? Well, the Bible says the Antichrist is going to reign in the Israel that we have today. All right. Zedekiah's sons were killed in front of him. And then Nebuchadnezzar had his eyes put out and then dragged him to Babylon. Now, recall this on studying the Old Testament, 1 Corinthians 10:6. Now these things happened as examples for us, so that we would not crave evil things as they also craved. 1 Corinthians 10:11. Now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. This is written for our instruction. We're supposed to get something from this. All right? I'll end this section on the hope. There is hope at the end of 2 Chronicles, because Ezra and Nehemiah are writing it. Okay? And so they have to end, of course, with the hopeful note that Ezra recorded. He fast forward to year 538 BC, from 586 to 538, when the first exiles returned to rebuild the temple under Cyrus, the king of Persia. And then Ezra has this copied for us. And the cool thing about this is the copy that we have right here at the end of 2 Chronicles is the same one that we have in the book of Ezra. He says this. This is what Cyrus wrote. So this is a copy of what Cyrus wrote. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever there is among all of his people, may the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. So even though all of this all these horrible things happened in Judah, Ezra ends it with this hope, this hopeful ending in 2 Chronicles. And that's where we're going to pick up when we get to the book of Ezra.